Welcome to grayprimer, a show that's mostly about miniatures. My name is Nick, I'm your host, and in this video I'll be creating a diorama at a much smaller scale than my usual Warhammer 40,000 stuff. This one's all about Adeptus Titanicus, and will be set during the last days of the Horus Heresy siege of Terra, when heretical forces finally reached the walls of the Imperial Palace. Now last spring I won the skills section in an ontabletop.com competition with this piece. I guess that means that Jerry, Warren, and Justin and the rest like it orky. This is what I put my winnings towards, and yes indeed on tabletop. I love you too. I'm going to use Questoris Imperial Knights from Titanicus and Valkyrie Assault Carriers from the Aeronautica Imperialis game, which is conveniently the same scale. Now the instructions? Well, they're a little cheap looking, and a bit tatty coming out of the box. The decals are gorgeous though, and the kit itself, well, that looks nicely detailed, especially for such a small scale. I've built so many normal-sized Imperial Knights that looking at this one makes me feel like a giant. I still can't believe that there are 3 in this little box. The instructions are a little better, but still monochrome. And the decals are again fantastically detailed, although I would have liked to see a bit of color in there. These micro knights even look cool on the sprue, and it feels like they've not sacrificed any detail in these tiny little kits. Let's look at the star of the show, the Warmaster Iconoclast Baal Titan, which is even bigger than a Warlord Titan. This thing is a towering colossus. It comes with a stack of sprues to provide a bunch of building and posing options. There's also a great decal sheet covering both loyalist and heretical forces. The instruction manual is over 100 build steps, and while sadly monochrome, it is very easy to follow. Look at the detail on these sprues, the ornamentation, the rivets, vents, chains, everything looks so crisp, and you can see that there are options for both loyal and heretical builds here too. Absolutely beautiful. Alright, let's get into it and start clipping and sticking. So what tools do I use for a build like this? Well, it's a plastic kit, so I'll glue it together with Humbrol Precision Poly Cement. I'll clip the parts from the sprues with my old faithful Zuron 410 micro shear flush cutters, and I'll trim lumps, bumps, and mold lines with the Stanley Tools folding pocket knife, which is the best hobby knife I've ever used. It's an absolute legend. And finally I'll grab all these files, drills, saws, and pointy sticks for all the other less glamorous parts of mini building. At this point I also like to prepare my workspace for all of the other parts of the diorama build that are to come. So I'll grab paints, lots of paints, inks, pigments, oils, flow improver, thinners. I'll get it all out, I'll make sure I have the right things in front of me. I also set aside basing materials that I need, and I'm definitely going to use a little bit of this fine Citadel sand, and some of the fantastic base ready mix from Geek Gaming Scenics. And I've also got a few of these really nicely shaped pebbles from an aquarium store. I want to set aside some decals too, and all of these steps help me plan out the rest of the build before I've even started to clip plastic from sprues. It just puts me onto the right path early on. So the little Valkyries were pretty simple builds, just very minor alternate weapon options in there as well. You do get 4 of them in the box, although I'll actually only use 1 of them. I do think they look really cool. The knights look really imposing on the box art, but they're actually really cute. There's a lot more plastic in this kit than with the Valkyries, and I think Games Workshop did a great job with weapons choices and some posing options. But the Titan itself is a different animal altogether. A huge instruction book, 4 full sprues of parts, and you end up making an exceptionally detailed model. Every time I look at it, I see something new. And comparing it to the Valkyrie, you can really start to get a sense of the scale of this thing. Then you look at the knight and remember that there's a person sitting in a cockpit inside the head of that knight, so you can really start to appreciate just how huge Titans are. Even the weaponry is staggering. The blade of the chainsword is longer than the knight is tall, and there's plenty of detail on that sword too. They're not sacrificing anything, and there's even this sliding hook thing as well. Articulation in the legs and feet is fantastic and makes the model easier to pose for dioramas than the normal Imperial Knight model is for Warhammer 40,000. The overlapping armor plates and the highly detailed head make for an imposing looking miniature, especially when you see the multiple lenses that make up the Titan's optical array. Then add to that vents, shield generators, doors, walkways, ladders, church windows, probably a kitchen sink, and enough DACA to make an orc purr. It's spectacular stuff. It seems ridiculous calling a 60-foot wide armor panel a pauldron, but whatever. The pauldrons have a few options between blank, loyalist, and traitor, which is very cool. Here's how I hope the top-mounted knight is going to look when he's glued down. I did some work on his toes to make them look like they're curled over to better grip onto the Titan. The one in the hand is more challenging, and the Titan's fingers are very intricately articulated. Then I want the Valkyrie to be all caught up in the chainsword, which means I'll have to get an actual saw to it as well. And finally, there's the knight on the leg, which had to have all of his fingers broken off and reattached to give the sense it was holding on to something on the Titan. So as threatened, I had to take the saw out of the Valkyrie to show just how lethal a gigantic chainsword is, even against an armored target like this. I peeled back the damaged wing to give it a sense it was just tearing away with a chainsword, and then I crimped and peeled at the plastic with a pair of pliers that actually had teeth which looked very similar to the chainsword's own. I'm never particularly happy doing this to a nice miniature, but now the stricken Valkyrie nestles well into the sword. Damaging really expensive model kits is equal parts terrifying and fun. I practice on unfortunate victims from my bits box before I attempt the real thing. It can be really scary making the first dent in the armor of a kit, but if you want to make it feel like this is a Titan that's been through countless engagements, it's going to have to look a bit dinged up. And I have to be cautious about the size of the impacts as well, and tried to match these to the largest caliber guns in Adeptus Titanicus. Once I move on to the rotary tool, you know things are getting serious. I don't worry if the tool skips a little during this and causes scratches. Artillery shells would do the same thing. And just so you know, this Titan's fancy shields are finally down. So now he's just 140 feet of walking metal taking a lot of hits. I always make a color swatch planner before painting a large project. It acts as a reference tool for the future and is also invaluable at showing me the various finishes that are possible once the paint is dry. With this I can easily check if we've glossy or matte, but alright, let's paint. But first, let's set up my wet palette. I pry off the airtight lid, and then try to remember what my last paint project was, but fail. And at this point, I give the palette a little bit of a sniff test to make sure it doesn't smell damp or moldy. Since I changed to using distilled water, I haven't had an issue with mold. Apparently the new generation of Redgrass Games sheets can be rinsed off and reused, but I'm going to use up these old ones before I dip into the V2 stuff. I pop a sheet onto the freshly dampened sponge, smooth out the wrinkles, and I'm pretty much good to go. This Titan is part of Legio Vulturum, who are nicknamed the Gore Crows. The armor is half Vallejo bone white and half Citadel Black Templar contrast. It's a dramatic looking paint scheme, which is why I picked it. Plus, Gore Crows sounded cool. Under the armor plates, this Titan is all Vallejo metal color steel. I hate the metal color balls, but I love the paint inside them. The steel finish is glorious and a great base color for weathering and metalwork fatigue and decay. Metal color silver is perfect for edging the armor and for showing up any fresh damage to the plates. To avoid dealing with the leaky bottles, I decant a small amount of paint into little cups. These are my favorite metallic paints right now. This is the Valkyrie all painted up before decals and weathering. It's a great looking little model, even if its flying days are behind it. I spent a lot of time on decal sheets trying to find out the right look and the right scale, and some of the decals are just so tiny to work with. Here's another Valkyrie I actually ended up not using in the final diorama, but I love how the decals look, and that Tamiya clear green paint on the canopy works really well. Yet another bits box victim, this time for testing weathering paints. Here's one last look at the base painted model before I start wrecking its good looks with enamels, pigments, oil, and shipping. This is such a cool kit, even with the shiny Eye of Horus on it. I use moss deposits, streaking grime, and engine grime to get things started, and at this stage I'm just slapping it on there and trying to work it into nooks and crannies. I used the moss effect to lower down parts of the plates, as organic decay would typically grow up from the bottom. Then I blend it all in with enamel odorless thinner to make the effect look more natural and ingrained, and this will take a few more passes until I'm happy with the end result. You can be working at this for quite some time until you're like, yeah, that's the effect I wanted to go for, and sometimes you've got to let it dry as well to see the full effect of this kind of grimy weathering. As a little bit of bonus content, I had initially planned to mount this Titan on a hill that I'd made from packing foam and texture paste, using little trees for size reference. But looking at these test shots, it just looks so out of place in a natural environment. So I went back to the literal drawing board and designed Titan Base V2 to tie the whole scene to the conclusion of the Siege of Terra book series, which is wrapping up in 2023. I thought it would be cool to have this colossus standing in front of the wall of the Imperial Palace on Terra. And the shape of this packing foam made it look like the Titan has plucked the knight from an opening in the wall. And immediately this felt like a better setting for this embattled giant. I returned to my bits box to find appropriately scaled wall guns and greeblies, and I even found doors that were just the right size for a knight to fit through. So now I have a rack of guns up top, shield generators, doohickeys and thingamajigs, and a cool set of super heavy doors. Add a comment below if you know where I got the doors from. I honor the 7th Legion Imperial Fists who built this wall, and add twin-linked las cannons every 30 feet or so across the bottom. I have a few more banners for the 7th up top, and I've tried to paint the wall in a way that gives a sense of its scale, and I want it to look stained and just really grim. I might even do another of these wall sections in the future to create a second connected neighboring diorama. I mark out the cork basing, and then start to apply these really gross but fantastic terrain pastes from AK Interactive. They spread well, they're reasonably priced, and they have a beautiful finish. And I especially like that they can be left in little piles to give a sense of volume and height. Geek Gaming Scenic's base ready sets are brilliant for adding a natural finish to dioramas or miniature bases, and I'm going to be ordering more of these in the future. I'll let you know what I think of those. I also add some Citadel sand here to just give it a little bit more texture, and overall I think I've created a decent approximation of just how grim and dark Warhammer thinks planet Earth will look 30,000 years from now. And I think it matches the look of the wall sitting on it too. I use a Munchkin card game box as my plinth here. It feels like a good size for the cork base and doesn't overwhelm the diorama by making it too spread out. And after priming the plinth with Citadel's Chaos Black, I use Bostik All-Purpose to glue the elements all together. It's goopy and gooey stuff, but it's a great fixer for materials like these. And the very last step is to glue the Titan to the battleground, and we can call this one done. So almost 140 feet of traitorous Titan stands at the walls of the Emperor's Palace on Terra. It is swarmed by House Raven Knights and Valkyries from Armada Imperialis 103rd Tactical Wing. Its shields are down, its ammunition is spent, it's overheating, and its armor is badly scarred, but still it walks for Horus. I really hope that the author of the final 2 Siege of Terra books, Dan Abnett, gets to see this diorama, and that it goes some way to capturing a tiny corner of the unimaginable scale and relentless grind of the Horus Heresy's final days. I hope you enjoyed it too. I'm so grateful that you chose to spend some time with me. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. And remember that even when giants are at the palace gates, the one thing you can be sure of, the one certainty that remains, is that the Emperor protects. Until the next time, take care, and bye-bye.